Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Auraki, toko maunga, ko Kaiapoi, toko awa, ko McKinlay, ko McGregor, toko iwi, no Kaiapoi, toko kāinga, no Otipoti, toko kāinga inai. Ko Pam McKinlay, aho. Hello, my name's Pam McKinlay. I was born in North Canterbury in the shadow of Mount Auraki and lived between the Kaiapoi River and the Pacific Ocean as a child. My home has been Otipoti, Dunedin since I came here as a university student aged 17. I studied clothing and fashion design at the University of Otago in the 1980s. I moved on to study art history. I've had a career in art galleries and museums, and now I work at the art school in Dunedin. I'm also an artisan weaver. When I arrived in Otipoti, it didn't take long for me to work out that no matter the season, what one really needs to look great on the street is a fabulous coat individualised by great accessories. Having made and upcycled several fabulous coats over the years, I turned my hand to making fabrics, hand weaving shawls and scarves. I work also as a researcher in the art and science projects, so each piece I make embodies a story which comes alive when worn. These pieces are exhibited as hanging installations but come into their own on the body, where you can truly appreciate their drape, get up close to, examine the surface detail and colour nuances, and touch and feel the fabric. I am often asked how long it takes to weave each piece. The answer is weeks. Weaving is a time-based medium, with each weft laid down and beaten in one at a time by hand on a table loom. I don't get much change out of 80 hours for a single scarf. My most recent piece was closer to 220 hours. Welcome to the slow revolution. Each piece is unique and starts with research in the art and science project working in collaboration with a scientist. It takes time to choose and dye the yarns, and because the yarns I weave with are so fine, it can take another couple of days or even a week to get the project threaded onto my loom, and then the fun part starts. There is a saying amongst weavers that life is too short to weave with bad wool. The fibres in the scarves I'm going to discuss were all made from single-ply merino silk, other fine wools, and occasionally semi-synthetic cellulosic such as tencel or single-ply rayon. The last two fibres manufactured in a closed system are a cheaper version of silk while still being biodegradable. This is also an important consideration. The resulting scarves are light in weight, have great feel next to the skin and drape beautifully. The weaving is done by hand on a 12-shaft table loom with a double warp beam. Modified patterns are based on drafts from old pattern books in combination with free weaving. Over the past year I've been working on pieces relating to earth processes, and this year in particular the cryosphere. The first scarf I'm going to discuss was called Isis Cool. All of the scarves were woven in response to a scientist called John Tyndall, who was an avid mountaineer from the 19th century. He is called the father of climate change for his work on discovering the connection between carbon emissions and the greenhouse effect. This scarf here, Isis Cool, was woven in homage to khata. Khata are white silk scarves traditionally associated with the Himalayas and famously gifted to mountaineers such as Suhaib and Hillary. The symbols incorporated into this scarf design were based on the repetition of a cubic ice crystal motif, because not all ice crystals are hexagonal. It's woven white on white using the fine wool silk and highly reflective fine rayon for sheen. Every glacier begins with a snowflake, and the repetition of this ice motif emphasises this along the length of the scarf. The pattern changes towards the end of this scarf, indicating the massive forces of ice on ice and ice on rock in the underlying topography. Weaving with such fine yarn meant that progress was made at a glacial pace. I thought I would never weave another one. I started looking at melt stream effects on the Greenland glaciers and Antarctica, and then I did weave another one. This piece was called Ice at the Margins and was based on photographs taken of the Tasman Glacier Outfall Lake. Colour changes in the woven glacier panel indicate melt streams on the surface of the glacier. These were dyed turquoise and woven using an ikat technique. I further experimented with the structures of the weave to depict the melt flow and the rapidly disintegrating thermal face, with icebergs floating off the bottom of this panel. There's much experimentation in this weave, and I hadn't quite finished with melt streams, so I wove another one. The second of the Tasman Glacier pieces picked up on the melt theme, with greater disintegration evident and even more experimentation with the structure of the weave. You can see in this piece that the icebergs were getting more and more prolific and the glacier lake was becoming more watery. I wove a final piece in homage to Otago, a glacier and rock mountain in Iceland. Otago has become an international symbol of once was glacier. It no longer flows to the fjords. It was declared deceased in 2014. Most of the length of this scarfal panel is the woven rocky debris of the scarred landscape of the moraine, which is all that remains of the ice retreats to a small broken patch at the top of the mountain. I wove this section with up to 16 weave shuttles at a time to catch the wonderful variation in the colours of the rocky remains. Keeping track of the shuttles was highly fraught, but the resulting weave was worth it. It looks fantastic. I love wearing things that I've made, and weaving is the ultimate expression of that in textiles, where one can make a fabric from scratch. As an artist working in sci-art collaborations, I find that art is an ideal way to communicate climate imperatives in digestible chunks, but exhibitions are designed for passive viewing. What I aim to bring to my woven panels is something which truly comes alive when it is worn. I aim to create pieces that are eye-catching with beautiful shape and feel, which invite close examination and are a joy to touch, and when worn they also become a moving narrative space, and I can become the storyteller. I can tell the stories from the regions and I can tell the stories from the science. For example, for every kilo of carbon emissions at the tailpipe, 15 kilos of ice will melt somewhere on the planet. I'd like to finish with a poem. I am misty in significance. In sun and air I am water. Frozen I am icy in consequence. Ice is only ever cool. Thank you.